5 signs that someone has experienced psychological abuse. In this video, we'll talk about psychological abuse. And in reality, it's often subtle, unlike physical abuse, but it brings a lot of pain and tears a person apart from the inside. Psychological abuse is actually very scary, and you can identify it by your own feelings, by how you've started to feel about yourself. You used to be one way, and now you're another. And if these changes are for the worse, then it's crucial to pay attention to the people who are around you. How do you know if you are being psychologically abused? And the first is a decrease in self-esteem and self-confidence. If you feel that as if someone nearby is trying to destroy your self-esteem, for example, you hear insults and humiliation addressed to you if you hear a lot of constant criticism addressed to you if someone imposes their standards on you. For example, you understand that you want to live a certain way, but someone dictates their terms to you, and you begin to develop the feeling that you do not have the right to independent action, to an independent decision, that someone else knows better, that I will be wrong if I do what I want. Let it be better this way, as he decides. And so on, and manipulation of feelings if they constantly impose some feelings on you. For example, without me you are nobody. Without me you will perish. I have done so much for you. I have done it. You don't appreciate it. You don't see it. Without me, you would have been gone a long time ago, and so on. If you realize that someone is imposing feelings on you that trigger negative emotions, that can be a sign of psychological abuse. So what's going on here? If someone is tearing down your self-esteem, at some point you start to be afraid to make decisions. If before in your life you made decisions easily, now you hesitate for a long time and can't seem to make a choice. Now you're not so sure. This indicates a drop in your self-esteem. Now you're not so sure. This indicates a drop in your self-esteem, and you might start to think negatively about yourself because of someone nearby. It instills negative thoughts about you, and you might start to adopt those thoughts as your own. You might think that you're really some kind of bad person, not good enough, or even stupid, and so on. So any thoughts in a negative light, if you realize that the reason for these thoughts is a specific person, then take a closer look at them. This might just be that psychological abuse we talked about. The second sign is a constant feeling of fear and anxiety, and that's a very telling sign. If you live in constant fear, in constant anxiety, thinking that something might happen at any moment, it's very possible that you're experiencing that psychological abuse. Why does this happen? Because the unpredictable behavior of the person who is nearby, that is, he can behave unexpectedly. Here he can say something good and then do something, let's say, nasty. Here he can do something bad for you, and here he can reward you with some kind word. The emotional swings swing you on emotions, and that is why your psychological state becomes so shaken. You start to fear what might happen because things can't be normal all the time. You've already been hooked on those emotional roller coasters, and the victim is constantly under stress. When a person is under constant stress, their body releases a huge amount of adrenaline. This is starting to feel normal for the person. So a person lives in anxiety and sees it as normal, although it shouldn't be normal. And this also includes emotional manipulation. If you notice that you start to feel, for example, ashamed for your emotions, you are afraid to talk about your desires, about your feelings, a certain model of life, a certain model of behavior is imposed on you. You understand that, for example, in the words of your partner, your behavior is always wrong. You are afraid to talk about your own feelings, emotions. You start to adjust yourself to your partner so that they, let's say, don't get angry and don't punish you for anything. So, what's happening here? Here, life is lived in constant anxiety, lack of sleep, being in a depressed state, and not feeling the fullness of life, a happy life. So the person is in constant stress, in a constant depressed state. Next, the third sign of isolation is the desire to make one's victim completely dependent. If you understand that there is a person nearby who is trying to cut off your environment, if it is a man, and he starts telling you that your mom, for example, isn't a very good woman, that she gives you the wrong advice, that she's, for instance, ruining your relationships, your sister and brother, for example, you shouldn't talk to them. Your friends bring negativity and make you feel worse. At some point, the victim who hears all this thinks that it's care. But in reality, the abuser needs to isolate their victim so it's easier to control them, easier to manipulate them like a puppet. because the fewer people around her, the easier it is to control her. After all, the fewer people around her, the easier it is to control her. This includes criticism from loved ones, prohibitions, and restrictions. So at some point he says, you can't go there, you won't see those people, your friends aren't good people, you shouldn't hang out with them. And all the prohibitions and restrictions relate to isolation and creating dependency. So the abuser can intentionally create some kind of dependency for you. For example, financial restrictions. That is, he tries to isolate you. From work, says that you shouldn't work, that he earns enough and will provide for you. But in moments of your disobedience, as he sees it, in moments when you do not behave in the way, he punishes you financially. He takes something away from you, like leaving you without any pocket money. And then there's fear. The victim gains more strength. That is, she understands that she has no control over her own life at all. If you feel that they are trying to isolate you from your loved ones, friends, acquaintances, relatives, then why is this happening? In order for the victim to lose connection with her loved ones, so that she becomes more vulnerable, and it becomes easier to control her. The victim really becomes weak, and she stops seeking support from the outside. She stops trusting everyone around her, feeling like she's lost. She doesn't know how to live. And now she is completely dependent on whoever dictates how she should live. Further, next, feelings of guilt and shame. If someone is instilling negative emotions in you, making you feel like you don't have the right to certain desires or feelings. If you feel like you don't have the right to what matters to you, that's already abuse. Because a person is an individual, he has a lot of his own desires, preferences, emotions, and a person has the right to all this. A person has the right to their positive emotions as well as their negative ones. When someone dictates from the outside that you are doing wrong, saying you are wrong, feeling you are wrong, wishing you are wrong, and at some point, you start to feel guilty for doing all of this, thinking that it's actually wrong. And that's exactly what psychological abuse is. Here too, there may be manipulation with guilt, when the abuser begins, for example, to raise his hands if it is a man nearby, and he can say, you yourself are to blame. You provoked it. You drove me to this state. So that's how it turned out. And here comes shame for your feelings, needs, desires. If you start to feel ashamed, let's say, for just living, because when we live and do what we love, we fill ourselves up. And from that state, it's easy to share your wonderful feelings with those around you, with your loved ones, making both your life and there's more beautiful. But when you don't allow yourself to realize your desires, your feelings, you think that you don't have the right to any emotions. This is very devastating. And the last sign is a loss of interest in life. If you find yourself showing any of the signs mentioned, then chances are you already have a loss of interest in life. Why does this happen? Because when you start living not your own life, but live according to instructions, according to how someone speaks next to you, according to how, for example, someone shames you, teaches you life lessons. When you forbid yourself from living the way you want, it's only natural that you'll feel empty. You'll feel a lack of energy and strength. The lack of energy and strength will simply be because you're not filling yourself up with what brings you joy. When you adapt to your partner, for example, and start being helpful, or you are even trying to please him in order, for example, not to make him angry, then naturally you will be so empty that you will have no energy to live. So pay attention to your well-being. It is actually very simple to understand what kind of person is next to you. Just give free rein to your feelings. When you are with a person who does not try to offend you, you feel comfortable and at ease, and you can talk about any topic. Your soul feels uplifted. You feel at ease, good, and calm, but you'll constantly be searching for the right words to say. You'll be afraid to talk about certain things. You just won't be yourself. You're giving up a part of yourself when you're with that person who's abusing you. When you give up on yourself, you're betraying yourself. Therefore, you will not have any emotional fulfillment. You will not have any happy, wonderful emotions inside because you are betraying yourself. So, if you suddenly recognize certain things about yourself, then it's the perfect time to take a closer look at who that emotional user really is. That's all I have for this video. This was me, Elisa Vardoms. I hope for your likes and subscriptions. Leave a comment about what you'd like to discuss in my new videos. Don't forget to hit the bell. And goodbye, everyone.